It is the 41st millennium. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor of mankind has sat on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass, writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the vast imperium of man, for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day so that he may never truly die. Yet even in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigil. Mighty battle fleets cross the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncountable worlds. Greatest among them are the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are legion, the Imperial Guard, and the countless planetary defense forces, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name only a few. But for all their multitude, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat to humanity from aliens, heretics, mutants, and far, far worse. To be a man in such times is to be amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest, most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim dark future there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods.
That are alive, coming with me.
ZX Thunderman Commodore 128 and 64. I hit the floor, I hit the shore. Got game skills from days of yore. I closed the dead computer.
Sup nerds, I'm Bolter, and welcome to Beef Snake Nerdcast. So that was quite a long intro, but how else was I supposed to get across the horrible scope and size of just the merest, thinnest, and scantest of basics to Warhammer 40k? This setting is huge! Painfully huge! But in a good way. So let's get to it. Warhammer 40,000 is primarily a tabletop wargame, owned by a company called Games Workshop. It has been around since the 1970s, and has gone through a good amount of evolution and change since its goofy beginnings as fantasy in space, with dumb dystopian things tacked on. For example, pre-lore in the Rogue Trader days, the iconic Space Marines looked and acted like chubby, donut-munching rent-a-cops. A far cry from the genetically enhanced, barely human, brutal warriors we have now. The setting is vague, fluid, and elusive by design, with all the pros and cons involved in that style of writing. This is justified as history is lost, rediscovered, sabotaged, embellished, and or covered up. And with how absolutely batshit the setting is, this is actually a good thing. The scope and scale of what we are dealing with here is fucked. Death Starring a planet is a semi-regular occurrence. Warp travel is a voyage through hell. Literally hell. Standard armaments in the setting are banned 8 ways to Sunday by the Geneva Convention, and that's just the sidearms. Toss logic out. It has no place here. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get into the lore. In the future! 40,000 years in the future, to be a bit more precise. That's actually where the 40,000 in the title comes from. The galaxy sucks! Everything is awful, and you're going to die! In case you missed that part. In this cacophony of carnage, there are several factions of immense power wanting to conquer, destroy, or eat the galaxy. Yes, you heard that last one right. None of these guys are altruistic, or even nice to anybody, including their own. Every team is a spectrum of horrible. From the theocratically fascist Imperium of Man, to the warmongering senseless orcs, to the extra-galactic hive mind feeding frenzy on legs that are the Tyranids. Everyone is the worst. And that's not new. The Necron faction, a long, slumbering, ancient kingdoms of skeletal death robots, fought a war against another race of frog-looking dudes when the stars were young, turning their own people into soulless machines just to win. That dark age of technology in the opening quote, that was an AI revolt, the kind you get in most other fantasy settings. Now the Imperium of Man doesn't use computers. They just lobotomize people and use them for CPUs, or forklifts, or attack drones. And then there are the Dark Gods. Now I hear you. Bolter! If everyone's a bad guy, then who do I root for? I asked the same question when I was a little baby Bolter looking up at these cool-looking armored guys doing invasive surgery on an orc with a chainsword. The closest answer I found was, well, whoever sounds coolest to you. Warhammer 40,000, in being nothing but a bad guy beatdown with horrible ideologies and even worse acts, has done this interesting thing where people pick the flavor of awful that appeals to them the most. Take the resident elves of the setting, the Eldar. The once proud rulers of the galaxy broke their own back with pride and hubris and are now scattered, desperate people clinging to survival. Do you pick the Craftworld Eldar, the prideful, rigid, openly racist group that scheme and manipulate other races into extinction just to save a single Eldar life? Do you pick the Harlequins, the insane, uncooperative clowns, who will turn the tide of battle for the sake of entertainment and never explain why? Do you pick the Dark Eldar, the Drukhari, the depraved, raiding sadists, who hit other planets for cattle, for their gladiator pits, torture chambers, and furniture? Yes, I just said furniture. They are all terrible. Who sounds coolest to you? And that's really one of the cool parts about Warhammer 40,000. It's so damn big. Hell, most of my episodes so far have been about 40k, and I pick topics at random. It's just that dense. I can spend weeks or months reading about a specific chapter of Space Marines, and then the next time I look into it, I'm reading up on one of the Chaos Gods and everything about them. It just feels like the well of information never runs dry. If you want to look into it more, there are some really cool video games out there like Dawn of War or Mechanicus. They've also got books for days, if you're more of a reading type. And a couple of movies and miniseries like Ultramarines or Hell's Reach, which are really fun. Or, maybe you could find yourself some fine fan content to listen to. Maybe a web series. Hosted by a snake, perhaps. With big, beefy arms. And that has been the briefest look into the bullshit that is Warhammer 40,000. It's massive. It's extensive. And I can, and will, talk about it for hours. I've been Bolter. This has been Beef Snake Nerdcast. Good night, everybody.